Welcome, low ego action heroes. This is Debbie from DeltaCX.com. We're a full service CX and UX consultancy, and we are here for an impromptu, unscheduled live stream to talk about Figma and Adobe. Many of you who work in CX, UX design, and other areas are exploding today at the news that we've all just received that Adobe will be acquiring Figma. Hello, Yasir, Hyacinth, Janice, Helen, Eric, Grace. Grace, good to see you again. Babatunde, Priyank. Hi, everybody. So we need to talk about this. I think everybody needs the free therapy hour. I don't know how long the stream will last, but it sounds like we've all got something to say about Adobe buying Figma. And I was a little surprised to see it called a collaboration. Collaboration and being acquired are not the same thing. Collaboration is I love to work with Larry Marine, but I haven't bought him. Hi, Elvina. Hey, Charlene. Yeah, it's totally breaking news. I think I'm going to start a new playlist for breaking news. Lavinia says, I was wondering what your opinion is about this. LinkedIn user says, no, very Star Wars. Hi, Terrence. Good to see you again. Hey, Lovro. Hey, everybody. Tell me what you think about Adobe buying Figma. You know, put your comments in the chat. They'll show up next to me over here. And of course, really quickly, thanks to everybody who makes the streaming possible by supporting the channel on YouTube. Totally optional, always appreciated. Thank you for the delicious chocolate chips and streaming software. And of course, please do subscribe on YouTube. We've got almost 6,000 subscribers now, and all of our ad money is donated to charity. So I am here for you. Bad news, says Dino. Yeah, so first of all, let's talk about why companies get bought, because some of the things I saw on LinkedIn were like, why would Figma sell? Why? And it really is important for people to understand venture capital and investors and things like that. So based on some things I found online, and I saw different numbers, so I apologize if I have the wrong numbers here. Everyone says the sky isn't falling, Nate says. That's what you think. Helen says, Figma is great. Adobe is ... Devastating to hear. Maybe we're going to lose free Figma. Yeah, let's talk about that in a moment. So basically, when a company gets venture capital and investors, even early investors like angel investors and early seed money, you will often hear, what's your exit strategy? That's what the company, this startup is being asked. What's your exit strategy? And you can Google this. The idea of an exit strategy is that once a company has a lot of investment money, there's got to be some way for the investors to exit and get their money back. Still in shock. Charlene says they want their customer base. Yeah, all of these are possible. The chat room is the wildest we've ever seen it. Platform strategy 101, acquire the disruptors. Yeah, Shane's onto something as well. So when you have investors want their money back. They didn't donate this money to Figma. And based on different things I read online, it looks like Figma got somewhere between $300-something million in investment, and I saw one website made it look like over 800 million, but I'm not sure if I was looking at the right thing. I don't know the exact number, but no matter what the exact number is, those investors expect to get their money back. When you're congratulating your friend's company or somebody on their Series B investment, at some point that investor expects to get their money back. That is normally either done through an acquisition, which is where the company sells and is acquired by someone else, or it is through going public. That's the IPO, going on the stock market, because when everyone buys the stock, the company gets a huge infusion of cash and they can pay off the investors. But remember, you're not paying off the investors what they put in. Very often investors expect 2x to 10x their money. I used to work with startups in Silicon Valley, so I have some knowledge in this area, though I'm no expert. So if you put in $100 million into Figma, you might later expect $1 billion at 10x. So who knows what those agreements are behind the scenes? But people don't expect to put in 100 million into Figma and get out 100 million. They want to make money on their money, and they expect to get many times it. So these are sometimes the reason a company has a bit of a surprise IPO or a surprise sale, because the investors are starting to pressure them. Hey, we've been investing in you in X number of years. You're sitting on our money. We want to get that money back, and the exit strategy has to happen. So that should cover a little bit of the typical why. I see Eric says, show me the money. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's all about cashing out. The people in Figma will do very well, as they deserve to. They've made a product that a lot of you love. And then Adobe will take it over. And of course, if Figma is looking for a buyer, there's very few companies who are logical buyers. Who has billions of dollars, because they were just, I think last year they got another round of funding, their Series E, and they were valued at $10 billion. That would hypothetically mean if you wanted to buy Figma, you would need to pay at least $10 billion, because that's its value. What company has 10 spare billion dollars who would make sense to buy Figma? Because why would Apple want Figma? No reason. Why would Microsoft want Figma? No reason. So it has to be some sort of company that has this money and would have a reason to want this tool, this audience. And in that sense, as much as many of us don't like Adobe, Adobe is the right buyer, because they have a competing product, and now they don't have to worry about making Adobe XD better. They can kind of bring Figma into this. Everyone's asking, will Adobe Figma be better? Are we going to be paying for plugins and other stuff? And nobody wanted Sketch. Yeah, I think Sketch has unfortunately been on the way out for some time. I think when Sketch replaced OmniGraffle, and many of you are not old enough to remember OmniGraffle, but you have to remember, every few years I've watched some other piece of software come out of nowhere and take over the world. And 10 years ago, everybody wanted to drop Adobe Illustrator and use OmniGraffle. And then people wanted to drop OmniGraffle and use Sketch. And then they wanted to drop Sketch and use Figma. And there will be something after Figma. Charlene says, I loved OmniGraffle. I did not, because I was already using Uiuxers, and I was like, what is this downgrade? Priyank says, I agree. Adobe was the only one who was the ideal buyer for Figma. Right. So remember, if we want to have our hashtag empathy, then we have to look at it from Figma's perspective, even though we don't have to have empathy for a company that just got $20 billion. But it does make sense that Adobe is the right buyer in that sense. Janice says, what a business. We work, because people are actually using and promoting it. Figma tutorials all over YouTube. Shuka says, wouldn't this deal land an anti-monopoly legality issue? Now, of course, I'm not a lawyer, so I can't speak to monopolistic practices or things like that. But hypothetically, not necessarily, because it's not like Adobe has a monopoly on all of Figma-style software. There's still at least 50 pieces of software out there that you could hypothetically use instead of Figma. It's not like Adobe is your only option, which is technically the definition of a monopoly. Mono one, poly many. And the idea behind a monopoly is you can only go to one company for this thing you need. But you can use Framer, Uiuxers, Balsamiq, Mockflow. Who else can name tools that you could use if you wanted to? Just in Mind, Sketch. Yeah, so technically it's not a monopoly just because one company owns two very popular pieces of software. It would be a monopoly if that was the only thing you could get. Again, I'm not a lawyer. That is just my personal opinion there. James says, what happens to XD? And Marvin says, oh, hi, Marvin. Good to see you. XD is dead, says Marvin. And again, we don't know. But what very often happens in these acquisitions, not always, is the company takes the tool that they've bought and they integrate it into whatever their current system is, and they usually change its name to whatever matches their suite or their tools. So chances are Figma would be absorbed into the Adobe world. I don't know yet whether it would keep its name Figma or if they would call it XD because they have that fun little XD tile that goes with all the Adobe branding. But chances are it would kind of become part of Adobe Creative Suite, which means it would probably become part of the Adobe Creative Suite subscription, which means we don't know. We don't know what that means. Terrence says there can't be room for both. It's not even that. They are very similar in what they intend to do. I think they were direct competitors in that sense. But why would a company keep two pieces of similar software going? They'll probably find some way to bring them together or get rid of XD and just call Figma the new Adobe whatever. Nate says, I don't think they would kill the brand equity. Yeah, I mean, you never know. I mean, Adobe has a history of buying software and keeping the name, so it's really hard to say. You know, we had Macromedia products that became Adobe products and kept their same names, like Freehand and Fireworks and Dreamweaver. So, and those all kept their name under Adobe. So it's hard to know whether they're going to call it XD or they're going to call it Adobe Figma. Just the way we now say Adobe Dreamweaver. Amber says, I'm glad you're talking about this. I was sitting here feeling ways all by myself. Yeah, get it out, everybody. How do you feel about this? How do you think it's going to change things for you? Shane says, let's hope they don't axe Figma in favor of XD like they did back with Illustrator and Freehand. Tristan says, damn, I thought Figma would hold out. Hey, you can only hold out so long when you have hundreds of millions of dollars in investment and the investors are saying, where's the return on our money? It could be just a completely business issue. It's certainly not what the customers would want. Who knows if it's even what most employees would want? But once you have investors, this is usually where the investors push you to go. Anna says, worst news ever. Maybe not. I can think of some worse news, but yeah, I feel you. Steve says, maybe Adobe could buy Webflow. Yeah, I don't know. Charlene says, remember Corel Draw. Okay, that's a deep cut there. Hold on. That's thank you to the sun god Ra for using that old stuff. Going back in the day. Elvina says, as long as the quality doesn't suffer, it's fine, I guess. And exactly, we don't know what's going to happen. I can only say what typically happens when one company acquires another. And of course, Adobe has a long enough history of acquiring other tools that we can always look at what happened with those and imagine maybe the same thing happens here, but of course we don't know. Maybe it doesn't happen again. Igor says, what, will Adobe buy Wix? Yeah, it sounds like everybody is imagining that Adobe buys some sort of website making tool. Didn't they have that? Pier Mario, does Adobe have a tool where you can build your own website? I thought they had that. Like a Wix.
I don't know about that. They bought Magento for e-commerce.
Oh, they bought Magento. I forgot they bought Magento. Where was I?
Maybe they would buy Squarespace at some point.
Squarespace, you think? Yeah, that's my boyfriend over there. He's thinking maybe Squarespace. Yeah, I forgot Adobe bought Magento. That's, who bought Marketo? That was Adobe also. Adobe bought Marketo. Yeah, Adobe's bought everybody. Is there a Wikipedia page on what Adobe's bought? It's probably a much longer list than we realize. Let's see. Dalma says, could be more problem for design teams. Right, we don't know. And we might not know for a while because, you know, usually what happens in these mergers and acquisitions is it starts out with nothing really changing so that everybody can first get used to just the news and the concept. And it's really going to take some time for us to see how this plays out. But for now, we can talk about our feelings and talk about it. Marvin says, but it's just a tool. Our jobs are much larger than that. Absolutely, Marvin. And for those of us who have been doing this for a very long time, like I have, I remember decades of tools. I've seen people do prototypes and stuff in PowerPoint. You know, it's just a tool, and it's there for us to express ourselves and bring our ideas and designs to life. I'm a super fan of Uiuxers, as many of you know. Hashtag not sponsored, but you know, that doesn't help any of you with what's going on now. Charlene says Adobe bought Cold Fusion. Oh wow, that was a long time ago. I remember Cold Fusion. LinkedIn user whose name isn't coming up for some reason says maybe Adobe will learn to make better products. I don't know. I'm not feeling that. I'm not sure that's what's going to happen. Let's see. Joseph says, if you can't beat them, you buy them. That is often true. Yeah, that is definitely often true, where it's like, oh man, how's Adobe ever going to compete with Figma? I don't know. Let's just buy it. Faith says, I guess everyone should be able to use more than one tool just in case. Yeah, and the reality is once you know how to use one tool, learning the other tools are not that hard. I've almost never used Figma. I've always used Uiuxers, but I imagine if I had to use Figma, it might take me a day or two to get used to it, but I already know other tools, so it's probably not that hard to figure out. Hyacinth says, we should be expecting an offline Figma, I guess. Yeah, that's interesting. You're right. Adobe does have a lot of downloadable clients, even though they've been pushing more of their cloud stuff. Adobe also did like an iPad version of some of their stuff, so you might see an iPad version of some of these. I can't even guess. Elvina says, I think why so many people are keen on Figma is because it listens to its users and releases useful features most of the time. If it stays that way, that's great. Yeah, and sometimes, again, as you saw from the Figma announcement, they said like, hey, you know, we're going to be kind of separate for a while and we're going to control our own thing. And that's going to be true until it's not. So we don't know how long that is, but I would say assume you're going to get the same service you've been getting from Figma until some later point where Adobe says, okay, now this is going to be brought more into the Adobe family. It's going to be an Adobe product with Adobe customer support and things like that. And that's probably when you're all going to freak out. Let's see. Shane says, I have faith in Adobe despite everything. Well, it's good to wish and dream and imagine the good things will happen. Why not? Yazir says, I think there are really few competitors left in the market now to keep creativity alive. Well, creativity will always be alive. You can't kill our creativity, even if you kill the Figma eventually. I remember when OmniGraffle went mostly poof and iRise went mostly poof, and some of these have gone away over the years, and it's just something that might happen. So Corey says, most moved to Figma from XD because it was free. Yeah, and that could change in the future. If you paid $20 billion for something, you're going to want to see that investment and purchase pay off by usually, I can't say what Adobe's going to do, but usually raising prices, changing how the subscription works, and things like that. And Adobe has a subscription model that most of us don't like. So, you know, we already know that they have that in place. Mr. D says, remember Macromedia? They replaced Adobe Go Live with Dreamweaver at the time. Yeah, for those of us who remember the old days, I switched to Dreamweaver after using Hot Dog. Who remembers Hot Dog? Hey, Hot Dog! They were really nice people. I wonder whatever happened to them. So, yeah, people are saying, I don't know how to feel about the acquisition. It's tough. It doesn't feel like good news. And I think it probably won't feel like good news, and that's okay. That's why this is therapy hour. We're just going to talk about it, and we're going to say our feelings out loud. But the comments got quiet. Anybody else have other thoughts? Or I'll refresh my comment page. Hold on. Here we go. Yeah, and Amul says, I'm not getting good vibes from this. Yeah, it's hard to know. Shuka says, Figma helped democratize design. We definitely saw people flocking to Figma. You know, we saw people flocking to Sketch, 5 or even 8 years ago. I don't remember when Sketch came out. I don't have I'm not checking, but I remember when it came out, people went crazy over Sketch in a good way. They were like, oh, wow, I don't have to use Illustrator anymore. This has what I need. And I don't have to use OmniGraffle anymore. I can go to Sketch. And then I think people felt that way about Figma. And of course, every new tool that comes out that wins everybody's hearts and minds has something that the last tool didn't. Of course, we in the UX community, we want to make sure that we're doing that. As we have these new tools coming out, we want them to be better than the last tools. That's supposed to be at least evolution, if not innovation. Hi, JR. Mr. D says, I think it's a good thing. Okay, Mr. D, can you tell us more? Why do you think it's a good thing? I'm not against you. I'm just curious what you think. Kamal says, let's look at the bright side. Maybe we'll finally get a line to key object. Hold on, I need to go. Ba. Very good. Terrence says, if Adobe Figma ends up with a subscription, do you think it will mitigate the influx of aspiring UX designers? No, because if aspiring UX designers need a free tool, they'll pick something else. Maybe they I don't know what's free anymore, but they'll end up picking something that's free or much cheaper if they can't afford Figma. It's the same is true for Axure. I think everybody should be using Axure. I love it that much, but I know that its price is an absolute barrier, and so people have picked other things. Shane says, let's hope Figma gets included in Creative Cloud. At least I won't need a separate subscription for Figma. That's a good point. That really is a good point. If you're already paying for Creative Cloud and Figma just gets snuck in without the price going up, that could be a plus for some people. Or maybe companies that are paying for a Creative Cloud subscription won't need the additional Figma subscription, and they might save money. And then maybe they'll hire more UX people. Aha! Maybe that'll happen. Let's see what else people are saying. Mr. D says Adobe Figma supporting XD, PSD, AI, After Effects files, and the whole ecosystem. Right, so maybe Figma would end up playing nicely with native Adobe files. Always possible, though I happily bring some of those files into Serif Affinity. Bektor says, I hope the time won't come that I have to install Adobe CC just to use Figma. I think that's a possible future. I think that, Adobe runs on Creative Cloud and a subscription model. Figma can't stay outside of that forever. I would definitely think that it would eventually be part of it. Molly says, I feel a bit sad. Yeah, because you feel like you've lost something or you're going to lose something. I do think it will inspire people to look at what their options are. I think people will start to look sooner rather than later, like, if this is going to end up something I don't want or can't afford, what can I switch to now? So I think that might happen. Janice says, do you find that Axure pushes out updates that are useful to you in a timely manner? I haven't tried it yet. I want to make sure I have free time to make use of the 30-day trial. Yeah, really quickly, people know I love Axure. Here on the YouTube channel, I have an entire playlist with 13 hours of Axure lessons. And by the end of the year, I hope to add my advanced course as well. Completely free, and I donate all of our ad revenue to charity. So I'm not monetizing you. I'm gleefully taking YouTube's money to give it to a good cause. So Axure does push out a lot of updates. They do keep their software updated. They're always killing bugs and releasing new features. But I would say some of the key things I wish Axure would change, they still haven't changed. So it looks like my dreams for Axure do not match Axure's dreams for Axure, but who knows, maybe they'll get inspired now. Eric says, now Figma will get better at prototypes. Are you sure? Because XD wasn't great at prototypes. I thought XD and Figma were pretty close in how they really took a click-through approach. I don't think Adobe wants to handle something as complicated as an Axure or a Framer or a Just in Mind. I think they really want to be the best Figma out there and not try to become Uiuxers. That would be my guess. Trying to become Uiuxers is really complicated, and I think they want the market of a larger audience who wants simplicity. Uiuxers is going to be a smaller audience who doesn't mind complexity to do a more thorough job, you might say. Shane says there's a free version of XD. Jamil says, this is great news for Figma. I'm biased toward Adobe, but I loved Figma. I think with Adobe support, they can be better. Maybe, they'll now have all of Adobe behind them. So instead of being a few hundred or whatever it is people working at Figma, maybe they can take advantage of a larger Adobe ecosystem. There can be advantages in both directions. Shane says, very excited at the prospect of Figma playing nicely with other Adobe tools. Yes. Marvin says, if there's a good thing we can take away from this, it might help the UX field refocus on the craft itself, more towards how to drive finding the right solutions instead of just UI. I sure hope so. I'm not sure Figma or XD are going to necessarily lead that charge, since they still tend to mostly be tools that are about UX and UI design and not necessarily assisting you in being a problem solver. But wouldn't that be an interesting game changer if there were some sort of UX or UI tool that really tried to drive you in the direction of being a better problem finder and problem solver and critical thinker? Ooh, I like it. That's possible. Ilaria says, switch to Uiuxers and not going back. Yeah, that's how I feel. Raystorm says, left XD years ago because of poor support. You can find XD forum posts demanding the basic enhancements 2 years running or more. Figma was more than just the tool. They created a great community, which makes them a wonderful company to buy. It's that double-edged sword. Utsab says, data collaboration. Yeah, if these things play nicely together, that's a winner. There is, by the way, for people Uiuxers curious, there is a Figma plugin for Uiuxers where you can bring in Figma files. They're not going to be perfect, of course, but they can certainly be a place to start in playing around in Uiuxers, so you don't have to recreate everything you already had in Figma. Absolutely not sponsored. I pay Uiuxers their subscription fee every year. They do not pay me. And in fact, here on the channel and in my life in general, I reject any sponsorships. I reject sponsorships. I say no to all these companies. Companies who offer me things, I tell them to give it to my community. Speaking of my community, we have Slack and Discord if you'd like to join there. Totally free, no membership, no annual fee. You're not on a mailing list. Just here to help everybody. deltacx.com/links will tell you more about our YouTube shows. I'm usually live 4 times a week. This was a random, impromptu, unscheduled show that I just thought I should do as a breaking newscast. So you can join the regular shows. Like, for example, Friday, we do Practicing Critical Thinking every Friday. You can join that. Our shows are usually 6:30 p.m. Italy time, since I am based in Italy, even though many of you can tell by my accent that I'm American. Shuka says, I'm worried Figma improvement decisions would become market and dollar driven rather than user driven. Yeah, I can't tell you how Adobe makes decisions. Oh, thank you, Anna. Thank you for subscribing to the channel. So cool of you. Yeah, I don't know how Adobe, thank you, Edwina. I don't know how Adobe makes decisions. We don't know what we're going to see, but of course, totally agree with you. I hope that they will still be, of course, doing qualitative generative research with users to learn who they are and what their needs and tasks and workflows are. What is your task? What is your workflow? How could your work be simplified and streamlined? Hopefully there are great UX people at Adobe who are going to be invested in making Figma that much better. But of course, I have no inside knowledge on Adobe and I can't tell you how they run any of their products. Hey, good to see you. Sorry if this was asked before. I'm just tuning in. Can Uiuxers handle a design system component and token? Hey, Oz, I saw you were in Vicksburg. How's the road trip going? I see it all, Oz. I see all your posts. I'm a big fan. Oz, everybody, is Excel on Fire on YouTube. If you've ever wanted to learn Microsoft Excel, you want to learn it from Oz, check out his YouTube channel, Excel on Fire. Absolutely not sponsored. Oz is a personal friend. Hey Oz, we just so you know what's going on. We have an impromptu breaking news thing. There was an acquisition announcement in our multiverse, and everybody's freaking out about it a little bit. So I thought I would go live so we could all talk about it and have a therapy hour. Okay, so Uiuxers can handle, so Uiuxers has global widget styling, which oddly enough, they never made a tutorial on. And so many people don't know about it, but it lets you create predefined styles similar to like having your own CSS. I've got a tutorial on it. So again, if you just go on YouTube to the Delta CX channel and you head over to the playlists, look for the Uiuxers playlist, one of them will probably say, one of the videos will probably be global widget styling. That's about as close as you're going to get to a design system, since it lets you make a named style that has certain typography and coloring and things like that. Uiuxers not as good with some of the spacing and things like that, and Uiuxers doesn't really have tokens, but hopefully they'll be inspired now to whip some up. Talk to Uiuxers about that. Support@uiuxers.com, everybody. I am not Uiuxers, and I don't seem to be able to influence them very much, so I don't know. Elvina says, what will happen to Figma's staff? That is a very good question, and very often in a merger or acquisition, again, I can't say what will happen here. I can just say very often a company acquires another company. Over time, the two companies start to find ways to come together, and usually some of the staff are kept and some of the staff are not kept. So for example, if Adobe already had staff working on XD and Figma has staff working on Figma, do you need all of these people? I don't know. So it depends what Adobe's plans are for the Figma product. If they're going to super invest in making it better, then maybe you keep everybody. If they kind of want to keep it running and make it a little better, but not monster better, then maybe they either cut some of the XD people, cut some of the Figma people, or both. So it is pretty common for an acquisition to cut some people, because you might say, well, you know, we were already competing with you. We have some people who know this space and who can work on this thing. It might be a matter of who was being paid less. If the Figma people were making less than the Adobe people, maybe the XD people get cut. I don't know. Delicious watered down fruit juice. What are we all drinking? Has everybody started drinking because of the Figma announcement? Where are you and what are you drinking? I want to know. Mohammed says, will they remove Adobe XD? Really hard to know. You know, Adobe does have a history where we have seen some Adobe products replaced by the company that they bought. Somebody mentioned earlier that Go Live was replaced by, I think, Freehand. So it is possible. It is possible that they might say, you know, what could a company do? Let's just brainstorm and imagine. Adobe could make a way for Figma files to completely read and parse and accept XD files. You can open any XD file into Figma and it will be just the way you left it. At that point, you kind of don't need both anymore. So they could hypothetically, I don't know if decrement would be the right word, but they could, you know, kind of phase out XD and say, look, all your XD files work in this other thing. Move it over here. So that's a possibility. Of course, I can't say for sure. I save all of my psychic energy for other things. Elvina says, I wonder how Figma employees feel now. Yeah, they're not saying much today, are they? I really hope that they had some sort of internal company stock. You know, when we talk about working for a startup and getting equity, very often that equity is worth nothing. And because the startup just goes out of business. And so you go, oh wow, I had this stock in this startup and I was doing all this work for them and I never got any money from it. Well, sure, if the internal shares that you have never really have a value or you can't sell them, then yeah, that equity didn't mean anything. But if Figma employees have equity and have internal shares, then certainly once Adobe passes $20 billion over to Figma, anybody with internal shares are going to get that money. Excuse me. The first people to get paid will probably be the investors. Excuse me. Not sponsored by Chloroseptic either. Sorry, sponsors. The investors are usually going to get paid first. Usually they have a different class of shares. Okay, now we're getting into, I got an MBA last year. They have a different class of shares that allow them to be paid first. And then eventually we get into the shares that might allow any workers who had shares or equity to be paid. If workers had no shares or no equity, they wouldn't get paid. Hey, thanks for subscribing. Don't forget to subscribe here on YouTube. We're live 4 times a week helping people with CX and UX and taking live questions. And Akwechi says, will they make all features paid? I can't even guess that, but companies like to make money. You know, we can't fault them for that. That's how they stay in business. So I don't know what Adobe will do, but I would say look to what they've done in the past as a possible sign of what they might do in the future. And so if they've tended to only make things free on a trial basis and not have a longer term free or freemium version available, then that could be where this is headed. You know, there's a lot of this that we don't know. These are just all speculation. Hashtag speculation. Oz says, a startup wanted me to do a ton of Excel work in exchange for equity in the company. I declined. The company never materialized. I dodged a bullet. Yeah, I usually tell people you probably don't want equity unless, again, in Figma's case, they had a $10 billion valuation. That seems like a company that's either going to be sold or go public. So if you can get internal shares, they're going to be worth something. But when a startup is just starting out and their valuation is $2, we don't know if that equity is ever going to be worth anything, and at least 90% of the time it's not. So, you know, it's a gamble. It's just a gamble. Keywolf says, I smell dev layoffs. That's a good point too. You know, I think a lot of us have thought about designers and UX people and people like us working at Figma and what's going on for them, but they're not the only people. Figma's got marketing people, HR staff, developers, maybe even salespeople, evangelists. All of these people are going to be wondering what their future is and where or if they fit into Adobe, but again, probably not in the immediate term. Very often, not always, but very often these companies take months, if not longer, to bring things together. Ruik says, will they leave Figma tokens working or not? And what about design systems? Yeah, I can't imagine they're going to remove features. That would really be a bad idea, because y'all love that stuff so much. So they would really have to be out of touch with you, the customer, to remove something that is so important to y'all, like the tokens. Becky says, do you think they'll make Figma work offline? Yeah, that point was brought up earlier, that since so much of the Creative Suite can be used as a downloadable Mac or Windows or other client, wouldn't Figma end up as possibly as a downloadable client as well? I do think that would be smart for Figma, especially I think if they want to move into regions where internet data is expensive or hard to get or unreliable. I worked at a company last year that was in South Africa. People dealt with load shedding and the power going off and not having enough bandwidth to have video on video calls. I think if you want to be more accessible and broadly accessible to more places and countries, it can't be in the cloud. It was another reason why I never got into Sketch or Figma, because before the pandemic, I was on an airplane almost every week because I was speaking at conferences and doing corporate training. And so I couldn't use something in the cloud. I'm sitting on an airplane. So another great reason for me to love Uiuxers, because Uiuxers was a downloadable client. Good point, Becky. Terrence says, both you and Darren have mentioned it's not about design tools, it's about the designer. I'm at peace about the acquisition and I'm ready for the challenge. Yeah, I don't know if I have a good thing. Peace. Peaceful. Yeah, ultimately it's a tool, and it's a tool people love and feel very seriously about. But again, it's a tool, and some people went from Sketch to Figma, and you'll go from Figma to Figma, or you'll go from Figma to something else. It will work out. Janice says, sounds complicated. Who typically has a vote in big matters like company acquisitions? Okay, so based on my MBA and other knowledge, this is typically going to be your board of directors, but sometimes your board of directors includes some of your investors. Sometimes investors don't just invest money, they are also kind of buying their way onto the board of directors, which means they can influence the company decisions and company direction by being on the board. So this is definitely a board of directors and executive thing. But remember that people with a horse in the race are also on the board because the investors want their money back and with their profit. Radoslav says, R.I.P. Figma. Yeah, press B in the chat. Is that what I'm supposed to say? Press F in the chat for Figma. Elvina says CEOs and investors are usually of the loudest voice. Yeah, very true. And the board. By the way, if you're new here, if you are on YouTube and you put emojis in the chat, it should float up over my face if it's working. So it's interactive over here. And if anything really interesting happens, if people do a super chat or super sticker, it falls into the tip jar. So we have wacky things here. That money I don't donate to charity. I buy chocolate chips. So thank you for anybody supporting my chocolate chips habit. Yeah. So, gosh, I don't even know how long I've been live. I accidentally turned off. Oh, there it is. 40 minutes. Pizza. Elvina says pizza. Yeah, here it is. Pepperoni pizza to you too, Elvina. So thanks for that. Yeah, so again, I can't tell everybody what's going to happen. We can only talk about why did this happen and what could happen next. And ultimately, you have to find the tool that works for your workflow. Whatever's going to be best for your workflow is the way you've got to do it. If Figma is best for your workflow, stick with it. Now might be a fun time to try some of the other competitors to Figma. Anybody, who do you feel competes with Figma? Who competes? Hey, here's some fire. Thank you for the fire emoji. Yeah, it's a fiery day. I'll give you one back. It's a fiery day here on the show and here in the world of UX and UI and visual design and probably some other areas as well, maybe even brand design and other stuff. Yeah, Lakchin says Axure. I am all about the Axure. Many of you know I am a super Axure fan. I'm one of their recommended trainers. I do corporate training, and I also have a playlist here on the Delta CX YouTube channel with 13 hours of free Axure videos. So, and I hope to add more later this year. Reek says, is Figma on the web? Will it stay working as it is? It's the main feature. That's great. Yeah, again, if Adobe is smart, they're not going to remove features. They know that Figma got to where it is and got the customer base that it got and the super fans by having the features that it has. Sometimes companies do remove features, but I think that would be foolish. I can't imagine Adobe wants to undo Figma. I imagine they want to bring it into their family and find ways to further run with it to try to keep that market share. Conrad says Sketch. Sirocco says Axure. Umit says Adobe. Welcome to the world's greatest creative tools ecosystem. Figma users. Do we have a choice? InVision users, finally a decent choice. Yeah, I mean, InVision, in my opinion, used to be everyone prayed at the altar of InVision, but yet you don't hear people say InVision so much anymore. You hear Figma. Or for people who want more interactively realistic prototypes, Axure. So, you know, even InVision at one point was the everything. And you could barely get a job if you didn't know InVision, and now we don't talk about InVision so much. You know, times change every few years. It's fast. Tech is fast. Conrad says Sketch. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think anyone's going to go back to Sketch. I'm not sure Sketch has a bright future. That is just my personal opinion. I have no inside information about any of these companies. I work for me. Shuka says, heard about PenPot recently. Completely open source and free. I guess people can check that out. Didn't someone told me another one? They said they thought something was, is it called lunacy? They thought something called like lunacy. Someone said to me, "Ooh, I just found this thing and it's going to eat Figma's lunch," but I haven't heard of it and I haven't tried it because I'm using Uiuxers, and if it doesn't eat Uiuxers' lunch, I don't need it. Faithful Boy says Envision. Elvina says UX Pin might be a competitor. That's an interesting one. I think of that as more of a competitor to Uiuxers because of the realistic prototyping, like the interactively realistic prototyping, but we'll see. Framer, Envision Studio. Jamil says, in the product life cycle after maturity is always a decline. I would think the acquisition is because they are in the maturity stage and heading to a decline. As you said, it's a tool and another will come along. Yeah. That's the problem. Sometimes these companies acquire it for the workers. I've seen companies acquire companies for the workers and then shut down the tool. I'm trying to think of what was the checklist I used to use that Microsoft bought and then shut it down. And yeah, so we see that sometimes where they acquire a company for the customer base, for the internal workers. They're going to have knowledge that they think they don't have. So yeah, who knows? But who knows? Maybe Adobe's going to invest in this and help it stay afloat and keep it in a maturity and improving stage instead of heading toward a decline stage, as I kind of feel Sketch and Envision are in. Sorry, don't kill me. Elijah, hi Elijah, good to see you. I would love to hear how you're doing. Hope you've been well. I've been enjoying my time in Shapes XR in the Wild West. Yay! Yay, Elijah. Always wish you the best. Wunderlist, thank you, Shuka. You are right, that was what it was. They bought Wunderlist and boom. Ouch, ouch. Will Figma web stay? Only if Adobe is smart, because y'all love the web version. Y'all love the tokens. If Adobe is smart, they're not going to undo the things you love. If Adobe is going to play the KTLA game, which stands for Keep the Lights On, where they basically just keep these things running. Can anyone think of an example of a product that got bought and it never really got improved? It just kind of stayed alive? That's typically called KTLA. Keep the Lights On. So, you know, I hope they won't go in that direction with it, and I hope they will recognize that people love the tokens and the web-based nature of it and the collaboration and the design system features. I really hope they're going to be smart and hear you all when you say that. Conrad says, in the future, Adobe will remove XD. They'll keep Figma as its main UI software. It'll be called Adobe Figma or something like that. I think given Adobe's past history, that is likely. We can't say if it's true or not, but I think that's likely. Skype. Yeah, who didn't own Skype? I mean, eBay owned Skype. Microsoft owned Skype. Skype owned Skype. Wow, that thing's been passed around. Whew. I never found out what everyone was drinking. Jun Young says, is it 100% Adobe acquires Figma? Super question. Usually companies don't announce these things when they're only rumors because it can make their stock price go funny and then they might get accused of manipulating their stock price. Kind of the way it was a little funky that Elon Musk announced he was buying Twitter even though he kind of wasn't yet, and it really ended up messing with stock prices. So hypothetically, and I can't speak to legal things about that, I'm not a lawyer, but typically you're not announcing that you're being acquired if you haven't signed the papers to be acquired. So Figma would not be announcing this, or Adobe wouldn't be announcing this if it weren't the case. Meduzi says, remember when Dreamweaver was a thing? I don't have to remember. I still use it. I actually have a client left over from 1996 who insists on having an HTML website that I have to do small updates to every 2 weeks, and I am hand coding HTML in the last version of Dreamweaver before it was Creative Suite, so I paid for it once a million years ago and never paid again. Tea. Jasmine's having tea. I'm having, my usual is watered down fruit juice. Dreamweaver. Yeah, I've got to reinstall it now that I just reformatted my computer. Will it be free? Nobody knows. You know, we know that Adobe certainly has free trials, but we don't know if they're going to have a free tier or freemium version. Did anybody check the Adobe site to see if Adobe has a truly free tier of any of their products? Because, again, I can't say that that means anything for Figma, but sometimes that's the company's business model, and they say, hey, this is what we usually do. We do have a free tier, or we don't have a free tier. So I would probably look to what they've done in the past, since they've acquired a lot of companies. Terrence says coffee and coconut cream. Yeah, I do decaf with coconut cream, or that's good stuff. Sirocco says, time for Uiuxers to do some advertising or wait and see? I think of Uiuxers as being pretty bad with marketing and advertising. They're unfortunately the best kept secret, which can only hurt them. I hope they'll come out swinging on this one and try to win some people over. If I worked at Uiuxers right now, I would be telling them to extend their free trial. Create a 90-day free trial so that people can really take their time, because Uiuxers has a long learning curve. Take their time to really learn Uiuxers and get hooked on it. That's what I would tell Uiuxers to do. They're not asking. That's my suggestion. Like, for example, this software I use for broadcasting, it's a little complicated to learn. They give you a 60-day free trial. That's definitely enough time to get comfortable with it and fall in love with it, or decide you don't want it. I think Uiuxers' 30-day trial is too short. Yeah. Okay, Jenna says, that's amazing about your Dreamweaver client. Yeah, long story there. So, yeah, I think Uiuxers should jump on this, but knowing Uiuxers, they won't. I think they're just not great at that stuff. I think they're passive. But I would love to be wrong. Please prove me wrong. Please, Uiuxers, prove me wrong. I would love to be wrong. Oh, yes, please. Please, please. Please. Yeah. So yeah, if you're just joining, thanks for tuning in to our breaking news segment about Adobe acquiring Figma. Your comments and questions are welcome, though I don't work at either company, so I can only speculate on things. If you're interested in our YouTube show, where I broadcast 4 times a week in a more scheduled fashion, check out deltacx.com/links. Everything you could want is there, like how to join our Slack and our Discord communities, which are completely free. Janice says, I wonder who at Uiuxers is listening to. Who Uiuxers is listening to if they're not listening to you, one of their experts. They're listening to their CEO. It's in my opinion, Uiuxers is too insulated. It's kind of whatever the CEO wants is what happens. I don't think that's the best way to go. I think a CEO is there to make some decisions or some tiebreaker decisions, but I think that they should be listening more to their customers and should be listening more to some of their power users and some of the newbies. Thank you, Universe Scholar. Thank you. Yeah, I just figured, you know what? I can go live. All I have to do is slap on a little concealer, pour a cup of water, and change my shirt so you don't see my dog footprints, and I'm ready to go. Pierre says, will this acquisition end the era of tool-dependent Uiuxers who think UX equals being a Figma jockey? Pierre, I'm going to go with no. Because whatever the tool is, you're still going to get those people. You're still going to get people who say, I can use Sketch, so I'm a UX designer. And I go, no, not unless you're doing this. It's not UX unless you're involving the user in research and testing. Just being able to use Figma, just being able to use Sketch doesn't mean that you are a UX designer or a good UX designer. Because that would mean that if a developer, a programmer, picked up Figma and got good at Figma, will we say that person's a great UX designer if they've never studied UX, never learned anything about UX foundational principles? No, we would probably say, oh, I'm missing my triangles. I forgot to add my triangles. Sorry, I had to rebuild some of vMix when I erased my computer the other day, and it looks like I forgot to add my triangles. Who can find my triangles? Well, anyway, some of you know my phases of proficiency. Here it is, phases of proficiency triangles. Let's slide this one out. So if you are just using tools, then you are at the building blocks phase of proficiency. You can use a tool and you can make a thing, but the quality of that thing is only going to be as good as your UX skills. Sure, anybody can make a Figma prototype. Grandma can make a Figma prototype, but that doesn't mean it's good design. It doesn't mean it's good UX design. It doesn't mean it's good UI design. It doesn't mean it's good interaction design. So this is where we're at the building blocks level of proficiency, where I can use a tool and I can make a thing. But was it made with science and technique? Was it really made well with skill and knowledge and the application of that knowledge? That's where that difference is. And then, of course, strategy for people with more years of experience. So I would say this is not going to stop people from thinking that the tool is the skill, or the tool means they're a UX designer or something like that. It's unfortunate, it's a misunderstanding, but all we can do is keep trying to find ways to say, hey, it's great that you're good at using Figma, but UX, CX, UI, these are just other skills. Corey says, exactly. Just because I can use Photoshop doesn't make me a visual designer. That is my favorite example. I always crack up when a job application says, how many years do you have in Adobe Photoshop? I got my first copy of Adobe Photoshop in 1994. That means I've been using Photoshop for 28 years. But guess what? I'm a terrible artist. Yes. And anyone who wasn't sure only has to look at my book cover to know I'm a terrible artist. So, yeah, it's not about the tool. Being good at Photoshop didn't make me a better artist. I'm just naturally not a great artist. I like to say all of my artistic talent ended up in music. Let's see. Thank you, Universe Scholar. Jamie R. says, skill sets can't be acquired for any amount of money, but they pay well. Yeah, it takes time to be skilled. I could learn Figma in a day or two. That would make me good at Figma, but it wouldn't necessarily make me a better UI designer. It wouldn't make me a better brand designer. It wouldn't make me a better UX designer. It would just give me a tool to get some ideas out of my head, but doesn't necessarily make me more or less skilled. Yeah. So what other tools are people thinking about trying? Anybody? Yeah. Now I'm getting private messages from people. What? Adobe Bought? Hi. Thank you, Irene. Thank you for subscribing. Everybody can subscribe here on YouTube. We've got almost 6,000 subscribers, a slow organic growth here. But like I said, I go live here usually 4 times a week teaching CX and UX, taking questions live, and doing a lot of instruction. We also have a playlist called Micro Lessons where we teach a lot of skills and techniques. Hello, Hamed. Skill set can only be constructed by time and practice. Yeah, plus knowledge. Usually we do need a little bit of education or knowledge of some of the best practices and foundations, and then we have to apply that and practice over time. So totally agree. What's the best prototyping for advanced animation? Okay, I don't know because I don't do advanced animation. I've heard some people say they like Principle for that. As much as I love Axure, your animation options are limited. They exist, but they are limited. For what I'm usually designing, they're good enough because I know someone better than I am will make even better animations. But I've heard that some people like Principle for animations and kind of micro moment kind of things. Not sponsored. I've never used Principle. There we go. Not sponsored. Yeah. Not for sale. I'm not for sale or rent. Though I'm always happy to get chocolate chips. Framer and Principle for advanced animation. Thank you, Lakshi. Yeah, so that I heard about Principle. I haven't tried Framer, but it sounds like those are some good choices there. Yeah. Who else wants to talk about their feelings or their reactions to all of this? Is everyone feeling better yet? Gonna have to make a playlist on YouTube. Breaking news. Hey, thank you, JR. Yeah, I don't have too much else to say about this. We've been going for an hour now. Thanks to everybody for hanging out and, going with the feels. Again, I don't work for either company. I can't tell you what will happen. We can only look at Adobe's history of having bought many, many companies and get a sense of what could happen. Jamie says, I'm kind of devastated. It's optimistic to think it won't be negatively affected. Right. Sure. Robert says, yeah, after you said it's just a tool. Yeah, so this reminds me of that terrible survey question that I hate, which is if you could no longer use Figma, if you could no longer use Figma, how upset would you be? And my answer is always, I'd be upset for 10 seconds and then I would go find the best competitor for me. What does that survey question even mean? Doesn't tell us if people are happy, doesn't tell us what to fix. And in reality, it doesn't matter how sad people will be if you went away. They're going to pull up their pants, pick another company, and keep working. No one's going to be like, I can't have Figma anymore. That's it. I'm leaving UX and UI. I'm not going to do it. You're going to do it. Thanks, Terrence. Janice says, I don't know about feeling better, bracing for change. Mountains says, R.I.P. Figma. It'll live on as something, but I can't tell you what. Kalem says, hi, is there any video of your session which talks more about user experience master's degrees? Yes, I would say go to YouTube and type in Delta CX Education. I think I did a couple of shows where I talked about how I judge online courses, boot camps, and master's degrees. I think we went through 40 of them over 2 sessions. But ultimately, I talked about my criteria and how I judge them in the hopes that you will use my criteria. That way you don't have to ask me, what do you think of this master's degree? You can use my criteria and say, based on these things Debbie is talking about, it looks like this is a good or bad program, or it looks like these are the questions I need to ask. So I think if you type Delta CX Education, those should come up. Yes, thank you for the hearts, Joseph. Hearts back at you. And the fire. Chang says, 36 people here, milestone. Yeah, plus whoever's on LinkedIn. I mean, it's probably died down now that I've been live for a while, but LinkedIn was definitely on fire. Most of my most of the early comments were flooding in from LinkedIn. So I don't know who's still left from. Let me see how many people are on LinkedIn right now. 26. So, but I think we had a lot more at the beginning. So we've got 36 on YouTube and 26 on LinkedIn. Definitely a record. So maybe I need to do more breaking news segments in the future. But then again, it's so rare that something this big happens in the CX or UX or UI world. But if it does, I'll do my best to cover it. Thank you to Montserrat for the virtual hug. Back at you. Chang says, woohoo, cakes? Well, why are we having cakes? What happened? Oh, who's having a cake? What did I miss? No cakes here. Though we are planning a nice dinner for Sunday, but no cakes here. Yeah. Ooh, it's 6 o'clock. I should feed my dogs and have some dinner. Robert says, I moved from LinkedIn to YouTube. Yeah, thank you. YouTube is definitely better. You know, we have over 600 hours of video on YouTube. How are you going to find that on LinkedIn? You're not. So YouTube, all the videos are archived, they're in playlists, they're easily searchable. Any topic that you're curious about that we've done on Delta CX, you can find it. So you just go to YouTube, write Delta CX and whatever's on your mind, and all our videos will come up. So whether that's how to do research, or questions to ask in job interviews, or what do I think of design thinking, or how to do unmoderated usability tests. I mean, we have over 600 videos. So there's something for everybody, I think. In fact, yesterday we did UI portfolios and interviews. Thank you, Scott. Good to see you. Thanks for coming by. So yeah, any other thoughts or questions with this now being an hour in? Hopefully we're all taking a breath and feeling a little bit better. Still with an unknown future. It's quite possible that Figma stays the thing that many of you love, and it's quite possible that Figma in a year or two gets absorbed more into the Adobe ecosystem and becomes something people don't like. But I would expect, if that happens, I would expect it to happen more in a year or two and not immediately. Like, this isn't going to happen before New Year's. JR says, sorry if this is a silly question, but what's CX? So CX is the customer experience. It's really the same thing as the user experience if we're doing user experience correctly. Users are customers, customers are users. I don't like to die on the hill of separating these two because I think it drives companies to make crappy strategies and do some unethical things. So CX is the customer experience, and the customer experience is about really understanding the end-to-end journey, starting from the time when they're not even your customer and they're not even looking at your company yet, through checking you out. I had a graphic about that, but I didn't put it back into my system yet. Where's my graphic? But anyway, CX is the customer experience, and when UX is done right, it is the customer experience. Milos is crying. Sorry about that. I wish I had better news for you. And I can't find my customer journey graphic. For sale. No. Oh, Sunflower's here. Good to see you. Adobe used deceptive design to trick people in subscriptions. Unethical. Yeah, and I think Uiuxers done a little bit of that too. As much as I like Uiuxers, they are imperfect, and I don't mind saying it out loud. The main difference between Uiuxers 9 and 10, or when 10 first came out, was that 10 was a subscription model and 9 was a flat pay once thing, and they tried to push everybody to 10, and I thought that was a little squishy. Now, of course, they're not really updating 9, and they're only updating 10, so if you want a more updated version, you have to go with the subscription. There's nothing wrong with Uiuxers 9, but of course it's not being updated, so yeah, you're stuck with the subscription. I didn't check Uiuxers prices. I think is it still 24 American dollars a month? For the lower level of Uiuxers. Uiuxers only has 2 levels last I looked. Let me go to the buy page and see what they're charging now. Yeah, 25 American dollars if you pay per year, 29 American dollars if you pay per month, and then they have a higher level which has a couple of extra features that not everybody uses, so you know, you can take it or leave it. That's 42 per month if you pay per year, 49 American per month if you pay month to month. That does mean you could hypothetically use Uiuxers a couple of months and then cancel it. But again, I'm not Uiuxers. I don't work for Uiuxers. I'm not an Uiuxers salesperson. I get no commission. This is completely not sponsored. I just happen to be a fan. Yeah, so we should wind down the show, but I will be here tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. Italy time doing our usual Friday show called Practicing Critical Thinking. Usually people send in tweets and articles and social posts and courses and other things for us to break into pieces and think critically about. If you'd like to send something in, head to deltacx.com/links and click on the link to send something in for the Critical Thinking stream. Totally optional. Otherwise, come and watch it. It's kind of our Friday rant, and it's letting off some steam. And so I recommend that for good fun. Otherwise, I think I'm going to wind us down. But thanks to everybody who joined in, and new friends of the show who joined in. Hope to see you again. New subscribers, thank you very, very much. And I hope people will spread the word about the Delta CX channel, since, again, I am here 4 times a week, usually, sometimes 3, to try to help everybody learn CX and UX better. Thank you, Shakti. So yeah, I'm gonna play us out of here. Everybody have the best day that you can. Maybe treat yourself to some cake later, as Chang might say, and you know, don't drink too heavily. It's not worth it. It's Figma. You'll sort it out. Thank you, Lavinia. Thank you, Colum. Thanks to everybody who came here. Sorry I didn't pronounce people's names well. I am just not good at names. But don't worry, there's karma in that. Where I live, people are not good at pronouncing my name, so I get it. Thank you, Joseph. So yeah, thanks to everybody, and hope to see you in another show, and have a good day or evening. Customer centricity as business intelligence. Visit deltacx.com to learn why we are